place to start. And I've made some, I've been doing some thinking since yesterday's live stream, which was the kind of iOS for beginners, how to get started. I'm not going to be starting at that level with the assumption that you don't know anything for the rest of the series. Like, this is not going to be a course to teach you from the ground up how to do these things. It's more of like, my original idea was it's more me studying and reviewing things and doing that collaboratively with you. So that's the way I'm going to be approaching that from now on. So today we're going to be starting with UILabel. And I think a good way to get started is just to look at some of the documentation, and then we'll do a little bit of a sample. So okay, according to Apple. So UILabel is a subclass of a UI view and UI responder, and it displays one or more lines of read-only text, often used in conjunction with controls. So basically how you label things. There is no selecting and copying from a label. There's no editing a label by the user. There's no drag and drop of a label. A label is a really, really simplistic thing, but it's something that we use all the time. It's a very, very common thing to use in your app. So let's get started. I'm going to create a simple single view app. Put it in the directory I have for this thing. Okay. So you can create a label either via the interface builder or in code. We'll do both. It's something we're going to start off with an interface builder because we're going to be able to get through more content pretty quickly that way. And then we'll do a couple examples via creating them in code. So to sort of get started, you can find a UI label down here in your panel, drag it out. Hi there. And then immediately you see that it gets truncated. And if we were to run this in the simulator, we'll see the same thing. So hi there gets truncated to hi. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is that we did not choose size to fit. So we can do size to fit content. So the bounds of this view, this label, will then be the intrinsic content size. And the intrinsic content size is something that the system will determine for you. But in most cases, we're going to be constraining this. We're going to be using auto layout constraints to constrain our label. So now we can see that there's no truncation. We run it again in the simulator. And we've got hi there. So when you have your label selected, you kind of have your, I forget the name of this exact panel, but this basically allows you to configure it. I'm just starting from the top. You can choose if you're going to be using a plain or an attributed string. We're going to start off with plain because it's the easier case. Whatever the text you want to include on the label, we can set it here in Interface Builder if we don't want to set it programmatically. You can set the color of the text itself. You can also set the background color that you see behind it. We can do that in a little bit. You can choose from different fonts. You can choose from the system font. You can do the default text styles, which are really, really powerful, especially starting in iOS 10, iOS 11. Or you can choose a custom font. Custom font, and then just whatever you've loaded up or whatever you want to pick from, you know, the available ones. So I typically, unless I have to because of a project, I will go with the built-in Textile. Automatically adjust font is something that we can see how that works. If we choose automatically adjust font, it's going to change it's going to help you automatically adjust the font when somebody chooses a different accessibility font size. So for example, here we'll run it real quick. So now we have it selected, automatically adjust font. I'm going to run it in the simulator. Go ahead and set the accessibility. General accessibility, larger text. So if we want to make it some smaller text for now, and then, so we've set that, go back to the home screen and we go back to our app. There it is. It's going to be smaller. Let's make it really big. Make it gigantic. And yeah, I think it's actually so big that it didn't even show up. So we'll see that again in a minute. But that's what that does. It, without having to do any kind of code for listening for the user changing those accessibility font settings, this will do it for you automatically, which is great. I believe this is an iOS, it's either iOS 10 or 11 forward. I think it's iOS 10 and later. So the alignment, we have a text alignment where kind of just like a standard word processor, we can do, I think this one is called normal. Let's check that out. Let's find alignment. Text alignment, yeah. And there's a couple different options. Yeah, it's natural. So natural, so you have left, right, center, and justified, just like you normally would in Word or whatever else. But the default is natural, and this is the default alignment associated with the current localization of the app. So if it's in English in America, the alignment's going to be left. If it is in a language that does right to left scripts, it's going to be right. So this is a really good way. If you're doing any kind of internationalization and localization at all, this is it's kind of a no-brainer to pick natural, and that's the default. And natural is this default option here with the 3 dashes. You have justified left, center, right, and then natural. I like natural. Okay, now the number of lines is the number of lines that the label can actually be, depending on the content size. So it defaults to 1, and we'll keep it here now, but we're going to come back and we're going to show, actually, why don't we show this real quick? So in order to have multiple lines, we're going to have to constrain the leading and trailing edges of the label. So, and then we'll also have to give it a Y position as well. So it's now got fixed constraints on the leading, trailing, and top. So it has, we just need to give the top so it's fully constrained. And it's 1 line here, and let's give it a bunch of text. Won't fit on 1 line. So you can see naturally it's truncated. Yeah, there we go, truncated. So if we want to up it to 2 lines, go again. you'll see that it prints out 2 lines and then it truncates. If you want to do unlimited, like just show as many lines as needed to fit the entire thing, you go to 0. And 0 means it could be 1, 2, or 100 lines. Yeah, there we go. So we are going to bring it back to 1 for now, so we can show a few different things. Enabled versus disabled. We'll go back to just the default color. When so enabled versus disabled is something that is inherited from UI view, and the way that a label implements is enabled. So if we turn it off, you see how it goes a little bit lighter gray. So it reduces the saturation of the color of the label when it's disabled. Highlighted means that if it is highlighted, it will show the text as the highlighted color. So if we pick red, and then we'd actually have to set the label to be highlighted, which you can't do in Interface Builder. It's something we have to do. I don't think you can. Let's just double check. I'm pretty sure you have to do this in code. Yeah, so we can do it later in code. Again, let's just do it now. We'll create an outlet to our view controller and call it a test label. So if we say test label dot is highlighted equals true, because by default it is false. And let's go back over here. So choosing it highlighted here just shows you what it would look like if it was selected. It doesn't actually select it, which is maybe a little bit misleading, but so it's black here, this is normal, but in code we're going to set it to highlighted equals true, and we'll check out how that looks. Great, now it's red. So we can comment that out, and we will go back over here. Okay. Although, let's see what unchecking enabled looks like, just to make sure. Yeah, see, that's weird, right? So unchecking enabled actually disables the label, but choosing highlighted doesn't highlight the label. It's a little bit inconsistent. Yeah, all right, strange, but that's good to know, right? So this unchecking enabled will show you in the storyboard what it would look like, but it actually disables the view. Clicking highlighted makes you understand what it's going to look like in the storyboard here, but it doesn't actually highlight the view itself, so it doesn't show up in the simulator. So good to know. Align baselines, align center, and none is something that we should get to. Okay. Align baselines. Okay. All right. This one always confused me a little bit, and I've never seen a great example of how it works. So let's check it out. Baseline controls the vertical alignment of the text within the label when auto shrink is enabled. Select align baselines to maintain the baseline as the font size is automatically reduced, or align centers to maintain the vertical center of the text. Oh. So as you reduce the size of the text, is the baseline of everything going to maintain the baseline, the bottom of the letters, or is it going to be center line as you shrink things down. The default is none, which maintains the top of the text bounding box. Access the value at runtime baseline adjustment property. All right, well, let's see if we can see something here. So let's make it big and not red because that's just annoying. Let's do something bigger. Let's do title 2. Yeah, title 1. And see how that looks. So I see when it's shrinking down. Okay. Align centers. Okay, let's see how this looks. What happens if we come in and make it small? General accessibility. Yep. I don't know. This one honestly confuses me. If anybody can come up with a good example of how to illustrate this, that would be great. If you could leave it in comments, I would appreciate it. But we're going to keep moving on. Okay, so line breaks is good to see what happens. Let's go back to 2 lines, and we are going to truncate tail. This is the default. So what happens here is that we have more than 2 lines of text, but the label is only allowed to be 2 lines long. So what do we do? How do we indicate that? We truncate and show the ellipses at the end. You can do truncate middle. And what that does is it shows as much of the label at the beginning and of the end, and anything in the middle, it truncates out. And then truncate head just truncates out the beginning. Then you can select if you want to wrap a label based on a character or the word. So character means at any point in the word that you can, it doesn't keep the word together. Whereas if it was word wrap, it's going to make sure to keep all your words together when it wraps. Yeah, there we go. Whole goes on to the next line. So we have a couple interesting ones. We have fixed font size, which is the default, which means no matter whether or not something can fit on the page, it's going to keep a fixed font size. But if you want to say, well, no matter what, I want everything to show up. I want all of my text to show up no matter what, and I only want it to be on, say, 1 line. The way we can do that is we can set a minimum font scale, and we'll set it really low to start. And what that'll do is that will do its best to fit all of your text onto 1 line, given this minimum font scale. So it's telling the system that you can shrink the font down all the way down to 10% of the original value, which is title 1, in order to get it to fit onto 1 line. I don't know why it's truncating like that. Automatically adjust font. That's interesting. That seems like a bug to me. I wonder if it has to do with the fact that we chose very, very small font. Well, that's definitely easier. When I went when I chose body, it now fits everything onto one line, where if we were to go back to fixed, it truncates. Okay, so maybe it has to do with the fact that the title doesn't work right with this. I don't know. I'm not really sure why that happened. The other option is you can have so with minimum font scale, we say, okay, we're cool with it shrinking down by 20% at the max, but we still want it to fit on one line. It will do its best to do that, but it might not be able to. So it's going to shrink it down. That just does fit, actually. So let's setting this at a tiny scale kind of made it hard for me to demo. So we will go back. Yeah, just make it at a more normal size. Fit on one line. Yeah, so you can see here it's truncated. It's doing its best to shrink it down to one line, but it's not able to because shrinking down only 20% is not enough. So it does its best that it can with the constraint that you give it. You can also allow it to do tighter letter spacing, which again is in an effort to help shrink it down to fit. In that case, it doesn't look like we got much benefit out of that. You can have a shadow on your letters. Let's go back to a fixed font size and we'll show what a shadow looks like. So by default, the shadow is clear, so you don't actually see anything. But we can show a blue shadow, 2 points width, 1 point height. So if you want a shadow, I mean, it looks like junk here, but I'm sure that there are some cases where you could make that look good. That's how you do a shadow on your text. And basically, that's all you can do from Interface Builder. So already that's pretty powerful with just a plain piece of text. But remember, a UILabel is a subclass of a UIView, which is a rectangle that knows how to draw itself. So anything you can do with the view, you can also do with a label. So you can set its content mode, you can give it a background color, by default it's clear, but we can make it, whatever. We can make it red. And then the entire rectangle there will fill in with the background color. Yep. Okay. All right, let's add another label. And we'll do a couple other things here. Okay, so let's give a label an attributed string, which allows you to do more powerful customization of your label. So we'll call it attributed label. Put it in the middle, and then we will attach it to the leading and trailing edges. And we'll make an outlet for this as well. Okay. So for now, it should still work. It should just show up in the middle of our screen and say label, and it does. So what we're going to do is we're going to configure this UILabel with attributed text. So we'll start by creating some attributed text, and then we will assign it to the label. So here's a basic string with a fun ending. Okay, and we'll, that's all we really need to do. We can say attributed label dot attributed text equals mutable string. And we get the string. I mean, at this point, we didn't do anything special with it, so it wouldn't make any sense. But in the next step, we'll go ahead and we'll configure this a little bit. So we can say, let's make a unique font. So our goal here is we want to make the word fun be with a different font than the rest of the string. If you just had a regular string, the way you would have to do this is you'd have to, it would be annoying. You'd have to create a string with this text, another one with this text, another one with the word ending, and then you'd have to position them all together, and that would be a nightmare. And I've seen people do that because they're afraid of attributed strings, because it's a little bit more complicated. But once you get past the kind of the syntax of how to work with it, it's pretty simple. So we're going to create a font. We're going to use the American Typewriter Bold. I set this up before, so you guys didn't have to watch me type all this. So we have one of the system fonts, American Typewriter Bold. It's a pretty big one. We'll create a range that is, it starts at position 29, which is this F, and it's 3 characters long, so it'll just encompass this word. So that's the range of our font. And then we add an attribute to mutable string. So we say mutable string dot add attribute, and we're going to be adding the type of attribute is going to be font. The value is going to be the American font, and then the range is going to be the American font range. So with just that change, that's pretty powerful. Let's take a look. Here's a string, a basic string with a fun ending. So, and we could do things like we could change the color. You could do all kinds of tweaks if you want to this. Instead of just adding a single attribute, you could also add an array of attributes. Add attributes, and then you just pass in an array of the keys with the values. So you pass in an array, you pass in a dictionary. So it's not an array, it's a dictionary with the keys and the values. Really, that's it. I mean, UILabel is certainly a workhorse. You use it in every project. Certainly, if you're doing internationalization, you would use different languages. You'd go ahead and you'd set that up with the appropriate internationalization keys here, instead of creating strings like this. You would never really do this, right? You'd have a special file with all the different keys for your labels, but this is just a good way to show how to use the actual UI element itself. So let's just take one last look here. Oh, one thing you can't do is there's no drag and drop customization for a label. You need to be using a text view for that. Pretty much anything you want to do where, so if you want to allow people to copy and paste, insert text, scroll through text, drag and drop, that's when you step up and you use the text input view. So just make sure there's nothing that we missed here. Highlighted text, shadow color. The one sort of outstanding question that I can't visualize myself is the baseline. We talked about this, although we didn't really see it in action. Yeah, so that's about it. It's a pretty simple class, but it's definitely good to go through and practice with all the different settings because it's something, like I said, that you're going to be using all the time. So, any questions or any comments? Add them in comments, and we'll chat about it. Thank you.